gonna say hi, Bloom? Go say hi to the camera. Go on, Bloom, you can do it. Well, hi gardeners, I am here with Bloom, my plasma corn snake, and today we are going to be talking about a topic that again has to relate to Tinley coming up, NARBC, which is the biggest reptile show in the country. So I know a lot of you guys are going to be going there. So I thought it would be great to make a video on questions that you should ask a breeder before buying a reptile, especially at a reptile show. So when you're at a reptile show, I know that it's extremely chaotic. There are so many different people, there's so many animals, and it's just very hectic. So it's important to actually make sure that you're going to be asking the questions that you need to ask to make sure that you're making the best purchase possible, and to also make sure that the animal is just going to be the best fit for you and your situation and what you're willing to do. So I created a list of 6 questions that I think are so important to make sure that you ask the breeder before buying an animal from them, just to make sure that you're going to be happy with the animal that you receive. So the very first question that I think you should ask the breeder before buying an animal has to do with whether the animal is wild caught or captive bred. So obviously most of the breeders at a reptile show are going to be breeding their own animals, but there are a couple of tables where you're going to see a lot of various animals that may not look like they're in the best condition. You're going to see basically not like a focused breeder on just crested geckos or ball pythons or whatever the case may be. You'll see a lot of random, really exotic reptiles, and a lot of the times those tables are actually wild caught, and it doesn't really say so anywhere, so you wouldn't know any better. So it's just really important to ask the breeder to make sure that the animal is captive bred rather than wild caught. Unless you're specifically looking for a wild caught animal to breed, then that's totally up to you. But for the average keeper, people are just looking for a new pet, and you want a nice healthy pet that's going to be captive bred. I actually made this mistake because when I got Chancho, my Indonesian blue tongue skink, I got him from a table at LLL Reptiles. So I thought that they only had captive bred animals, and that was my mistake. I should have asked because he was actually wild caught, and I had no idea until I was already home and purchased him, and I just had to make do with the situation. So I want you guys to be able to avoid any health complications or whatever the case may be. Make sure you get an animal that's going to be nice and healthy and what you want to spend your money on. Bloom is now holding the plant. Why does this always happen to me? I really need to start moving this plant away because all of my snakes just want to go hide in the plant. And I want you to be in the video and hang out with me, not the plant. So the second question that you should be asking the breeder before purchasing an animal is, when did the animal eat last? So it's very important to make sure that you know when the animal ate last, just to make sure that obviously once you bring it home, you're going to want to give it some time to adjust before you feed it. But it's very important to make sure that the animal is actually in fact eating. This goes especially for ball pythons. Some breeders sell baby ball pythons that haven't eaten yet, and that's totally not what you're supposed to be doing because it's just not going to be good for the animal, and you're going to have a really hard time getting that animal to eat once you bring it home. So you want to make sure that the animal that you do bring home is well established and eating very well and on a healthy track with the feeding schedule before you bring it home. If your breeder isn't really able to answer this question and they're not sure when the animal ate last, that's probably not a breeder that you want to be buying an animal from because they clearly aren't really paying attention to their animals, and that's just probably going to be a hard pass for you guys. That's a huge red flag. So just keep an eye on that. Make sure that you're getting your animals from a great breeder that actually knows the last time that the animals have eaten. The third thing that you're going to want to ask is the feeding schedule. So you're going to want to know when the animal ate last, and you're going to want to know how often the breeder is feeding the animal because everyone that keeps reptiles does things a little bit differently. And you basically just want to know exactly how the animal was before you got it to make sure that you can adjust it accordingly when you bring it home. That way you know what the animal was accustomed to, and you can kind of copy the same things to make sure that the animal isn't as stressed out because it's not going to be a completely new situation with new schedules. So the fourth question that you're going to want to ask the breeder is what type of an enclosure they're keeping the animal in prior to you buying the animal. So this is really important, especially for ball pythons, because I've noticed this happen quite a bit. People will buy a ball python, bring it home, put it in a nice big tank, and wonder why the animal isn't adjusting well and isn't eating. A lot of the times is because, especially if they're a big time breeder, they're going to have smaller enclosures for the animals, racking systems, things like that. So the animals are going to be used to feeling very enclosed in small spaces, and it's comforting for them. So when you take an animal home and you put it in a completely new situation with a lot of space, it can be very stressful for them. It's important to know what type of enclosure the animal was in and the lifestyle that it had before you were bringing it home, just again so you can make sure that you're going to keep things as similar as possible as you're easing it into its new home with you, just to reduce as much stress as possible, because bringing a new animal home can be very stressful for them. So you just want to mimic and understand exactly how that animal was being kept before you got it. The fifth question that you should ask the breeder before buying an animal is probably the most important. You're going to want to know if there are any health issues with the animal. So this is mites, parasites, any just irregular behaviors, anything that should be important you need to ask about. Just make sure that you get a clear answer that the animal is healthy and hasn't had any problems before you purchase it. Obviously, if you don't mind and you're willing to pay the vet bills and you don't mind getting an animal that may have an issue or two, then that's totally up to you. But obviously, most of the people going there are going to want to be shopping for nice, healthy animals. So it's very important to ask the breeder if there's anything that you should know about the animal regarding its health before you purchase it. And also, as you're doing this, just keep an eye on the animal. The animal should be alert, have clear eyes, don't have any like pus coming out of its nostrils or its mouth, no broken limbs. Another thing that you should also check for is mites. So it's really important, especially when you go to reptile shows, because reptile shows, oh my God, Bloom, you're tickling me. Reptile shows is actually a place where mites can be transferred because people are bringing so many animals there and people are touching them and touching other animals. So you really want to make sure that the animal that you're going to be buying does not have any mites. You check your hands afterward. If you see anything moving on the animal, that is a really bad sign that there may be mites. So that's just something to keep an eye out for. And when you get home, another tip is to actually just change your clothes when you get home, take a shower, because you don't want to be transferring any potential mites to your other animals. So that's just one tip that I would share with you guys after going to a reptile show. So the sixth question that you should ask the breeder is about handleability and behaviors of the animal. So especially if you're a new keeper and you're looking for something really calm, it's really great to ask the breeder about how the animal behaves and if it's great with handling or not. So especially for like ball pythons or crested geckos, some people don't want a crested gecko that's very jumpy, that might freak them out. So it's important to just make sure that you ask the breeder any of those questions just to make you feel more comfortable before buying an animal. Because again, you don't want to buy an animal and then bring it home and then it just turns out to be a nightmare and it's not something that you think you can handle anymore, because that's just going to be really stressful for the animal and you. So you just want to make sure that you pick the best fit animal for you and your lifestyle and what you're willing to deal with. So you just got to make sure that you make the right choice and pick an animal that you know you can handle and deal with and take care of properly, not something that's going to intimidate you and stress you out, because then you're just going to be stressing the animal out as well. And that's just a lose-lose situation. One other tip that I want to share about reptile shows before you guys go is basically that animals may behave a little bit differently at reptile shows. So if you are looking to see how an animal is with handleability, you cannot fully judge an animal on how it's behaving at a reptile show, because they may behave completely differently once you bring it home. This is just because the animals are very stressed out. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of stimulation. They may be cramped in a little container. So when they're stressed out like this, they may behave a little bit differently, rather than when you bring them home and they're adjusted and they feel more comfortable, they might be like a completely different animal. So if you want a crested gecko that isn't very jumpy, it may not be very jumpy at the show. It may be calm just because it's so stressed out. And then by the time you bring it home, it's jumping all over the place. So it's just something to keep in mind. If someone says that the animal doesn't bite and you bring it home and it's biting, these situations are always going to happen. Every animal is different. It behaves differently. So it's just very important to make sure that before you commit to an animal and make that purchase, make sure that no matter what happens, you're going to be able to take care of this animal no matter what, even if it does behave a little bit differently than what you really want. You just have to be prepared for everything that could go wrong and make sure that you're willing to deal with it, because you got to for these animals, because we love them. They're the best. Bloom, what are you doing? This snake is hilarious. How do people not like corn snakes? Like seriously, they are so underrated. So that completes today's video. I hope that this was helpful. I know, again, it's so chaotic and crazy at reptile shows. Some breeders might be annoyed if you have a lot of questions for them because they're just trying to make those sales. If they're like that and they're not willing to answer your questions, again, I would not recommend buying from that breeder because they're clearly just about the money. They don't really care where the animal's going. So that's just not a good sign. That's a huge red flag. So I would just pay attention, make sure that you make the best choices, and I hope that you guys have fun if you're going. Leave a comment, let me know if you're going to Tinley. I'm still not sure if I'm going, but I would like to, but I haven't really made the plan yet because I'm not planning on buying any more animals, and Bloom is now escaping again. So I'm going to go get Bloom. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope that this video was helpful, and I will see you guys in the next one.